Hello and welcome to my Siege of Orgrimmar raid guide. My name is Aliena, and in this video I'll show you all you need to know about Garrosh Hellscream, the last boss in this new raid instance. We defeated this fight with 2 tanks, 6 healers and 17 DPS, but similar raid configurations might work just as well. Garrosh is a 3-phase encounter with at least 2 intermissions that requires great raid coordination and execution. This is a very long fight and can last up to 15 minutes, so long-term concentration is important. In the first phase, you have to bring Garrosh's health to 10%, at which point he'll heal back to full and trigger an intermission. In phase 2, you once again have to bring him to 10% health, but intermissions after the first one are timed to be 2.5 minutes apart. You'll likely have 3 intermissions in total. Once you get Garrosh to 10% in phase 2, he'll heal an additional 20% health and trigger phase 3, which is more or less a burn phase. Let's go over the different phases one by one. You'll want to pre-assign positions similar to this. To start the fight, your tank should pull Garrosh over to the green marker. Range should start out at about the yellow marker, or about 30 yards away from Garrosh. The ranged team will switch back and forth from standing on the purple and the yellow marker every time Garrosh uses Desecrate. When this happens, he'll throw a weapon at a random ranged raid member. The weapon will persist on the ground and spawn a large void zone. As the health of the weapon decreases, so does the size of the void zone around it. Desecrate is on a 40-second timer, and while it's important that a weapon dies before the next one comes out, dots and pats should make up the majority of the damage on them. Other than that, phase 1 is centered around ad control. You'll see 3 different types of ads: Corprone Warbringers, Corprone Wolf Riders, and Siege Engineers. Warbringers and Wolf Riders will join the fight from different doors around the room and need to be picked up by your tank. There's no tank swap mechanic in this phase, so you can have one of your tanks dedicated to picking up the ads. Warbringers don't do anything special, but Wolf Riders have both a chain heal and a chain lightning ability. They can be interrupted, but every time you interrupt their cast, their spell casting speed will increase, so you want to avoid interrupting any chain lightning and only interrupt their chain heal. Garrosh will occasionally buff the ads with Hellscream's Warsong, increasing their damage and health by 150%. Your ad tank might want to save a cooldown for this, to increase chances of survivability. Ad spawn frequency will increase as the phase goes on, so for both of those reasons it's incredibly important that ads die in a timely manner. While the Siege Engineers don't directly join in the fight, they're still very important. 2 of them will spawn at opposing ends of the room at once. They'll stay on the balcony and attempt to power up Corprone Iron Stars. Iron Stars are large wheels that will mow across half of the room when fully powered. Anyone standing in their path will likely take fatal damage. However, they also damage any Wolf Rider and Warbringer in their way, so they can be very useful. When a wheel reaches the other side of the room, it explodes, dealing rate-wide damage. The further apart your raid is from the wheel when it explodes, the less damage is taken. While you can kill both Siege Engineers before they release a wheel, we found it more efficient to assign 2 DPS to kill one of the wheels and let the other one go through. For one, it meant more DPS on Garrosh and the ads, and secondly, we could also position the ads so they would get hit by the wheel and take extra damage, making it much easier to kill them. Once Garrosh reaches 10% health, he'll do a little RP scene in the middle of the room and heal himself to full. During this, you should make sure to finish off all remaining ads. It's very important they all die before the first intermission. When Garrosh finishes his little talk, your entire raid will be transported into a spirit realm for an intermission. Each intermission lasts 1 minute. Your goal during each intermission is to defeat all the Shah creatures as fast as possible. While the Shah are up, Garrosh himself is separated from your raid by a wall, and he'll absorb energy from the heart of Yasha Raj until all Shah creatures are defeated. His abilities change depending on how much energy he has, so you always want to keep his energy as low as possible. There are 3 different spirit realms, one of which requires your raid to split up and go into 2 different directions. You want to assign either left or right directions for your raid ahead of time, and you should make sure to have an even split of DPS, healers, and tanks on each side. When the Shah creatures die, they drop little buffs that give a 50% damage reduction while in the spirit realm to anyone picking it up. It's very helpful to pick those up whenever possible, since once you've defeated all Shah creatures, the barrier to Garrosh drops and he'll cast Annihilate for the remaining time you're in the spirit world. Annihilate is a frontal cone ability that instantly kills anyone standing in it when the cast goes off. It'll still deal moderate damage to your raid when not standing in it too. Everyone needs to consistently move out of Annihilate and survive through the damage until the 1-minute timer is up, at which point you'll get dropped back in the middle of the main room and phase 2 begins. From here on out, you'll have an intermission every 2.5 minutes or until you hit phase 3. Your ranged raid members should instantly move back to one of the assigned Desecrate spots, and your tank should move Garrosh to the usual tank spot. Desecrate handling has not switched from phase 1. Your ranged pile is still moving from spot to spot and making sure a weapon is dead before a new one comes up. There are no adds in this phase, but Garrosh gains a few new abilities in addition to Desecrate. His first new ability is Gripping Despair. This is a stacking dot debuff on the tank, and tanks need to switch off tanking Garrosh frequently. His second new ability is Touch of Yasharaj, which is a mind control used on random players that expires when the player hits 20% health. Breaking people out of mind control quickly is important, but your raid must make sure not to dot them up heavily and kill them. This happens roughly every 45 seconds. His third new ability is Whirling Corruption. This is a channel cast in which Garrosh whirls his weapon around and does fairly heavy AoE damage to every raid member. Damage of this is decreased the further people are away from Garrosh, but in its basic form it shouldn't pose too much of a problem. Whirling Corruption happens roughly every 50 seconds. Your ranged raid members should be stacked for the majority of Phase 2, allowing for moving back and forth for Desecrate casts, which will make Whirling Corruption healing easier. After your raid handles a second intermission, Garrosh has most likely hit 25 energy. Reaching this threshold will enable Garrosh to use Empowered Whirling Corruption instead of Whirling Corruption. Empowered Whirling Corruption will spawn little void zones under random raid members' feet that explode after a few seconds and each pop a shot add. Your raid cannot be grouped up for Empowered Whirling Corruption and must be spread out right before it happens, so no one takes the additional damage from the void zones on top of the already heavy AoE from the corruption itself. The adds do not need to be tanked, but they have DPS priority and should be killed as soon as possible. If an add is near another add when it dies, it'll heal the nearby add to full and buff it greatly, so the adds must be kept apart. If you're getting another intermission before getting him to 10% and triggering in Phase 3, Garrosh will likely have more than 50 energy and empower another ability, this time Touch of Yasharaj, the mind control. Empowered mind control will transform afflicted players into Shah creatures that are immune to crowd control effects and will attempt to cast Touch of Yasharaj on other raid members. This must be interrupted, or you'll very quickly end up with a completely mind controlled raid. Once you push Garrosh to 10% health, Phase 3 triggers. He will regain 20% of his maximum health pool, start looking really crazy, and automatically acquire 100 energy. With 100 energy, his remaining two abilities are transformed. Empowered Desecrated weapons are unkillable. While you can reduce their health and hence the size of their Desecrate pool, they'll just regrow over time. As such, you shouldn't bother trying to damage any Empowered Desecrated weapons, but have your raid try to be in the corners of the room when the Desecrate weapon timer is up. As long as you don't drop them in the middle of the raid, it's fine. Lastly, Empowered Gripping Despair is kind of nasty. When the Gripping Despair debuff runs out on a tank, it'll cause an AoE explosion equal to the damage of a Gripping Despair tick. This is raid-wide and unavoidable. Moreover, every raid member gains a debuff that increases damage taken by subsequent Gripping Despair explosions by 10% per stack. Stacks are gained depending on how many stacks of the debuff the tank had at the time of explosion. If he had 3 stacks, the raid will take 30% additional damage on the next explosion. This debuff persists until the end of the encounter. The Chulong didn't read of this ability basically means that you want to have tank swaps as much as possible to keep the base amount of the explosion low. Raid cooldown should be timed with every empowered Whirling Corruption in Phase 3. While the corruption shouldn't kill any raid members, it might coincide with the empowered Gripping Despair explosion. You want to avoid this whenever possible, but as mentioned, also preemptively use the cooldowns. Phase 3 is all about controlling the fight. You need to make sure to drop Desecrates out of the way, you want to try and be close to the boss when the mind control is about to happen, so it's easier for the DPS to interrupt and break people out of them, and you need to cool down and survive through Whirling Corruptions. Mind control and Shah adds have absolute killing priority. As long as you keep the fight controlled, Phase 3 should be over fairly quickly and Garrosh will fall. Those are all the tips that I have for Garrosh Hellscream. Thank you for watching this guide. I hope it was helpful. I stream most of our raids and other gaming content over at Twitch. I'll put the link in the description box, so come stop by sometime.